Okay, today we're going to go over simplifying our Inventor assemblies. Either just simplifying them to send out to customers, or if we're getting ready to prep them for Revit, and going over the Revit conversion process as well. So there's two ways to simplify our assemblies for two reasons. One is to reduce file size when we're sending out to customers. Again, Revit, we are one part in a giant building. And two, to protect our intellectual property. So we're going to go over both those. And one way is much easier than the other, but you're going to see the difference in the end of the extra effort of doing the enveloping process really reduces our file size and makes it more acceptable for a Revit engineer. Okay, so the first way we're going to go over is just to hide and turn off visibility. I know you guys know how to do this. I've done it before. I'm just going to show you some of my tips. So first thing I'm going to do is create a section view. And I'm going to name this view and save it for later. So A, when somebody's putting this on a skid, I can easily take all the inside out. And B, just save it for later edits. So what I've done is shift right click, and I changed to part priority. I then find in the browser, right click, find in browser, go up a few levels to prepare an assembly. And now I can take out large batches of parts all at once. All right, so shift right click, change the part. And now you can start flying through this, taking out patterns all at once, your welds. I'm going to take out the burner and all these little small components that we really don't need to have for the customer. This is all going to reduce the file size as well as protect our intellectual property. So here I'm just coming through, cleaning it up. Could have left a PV in there maybe, or just do an extrusion. Here you're going to see I'm going to shift right click, change to body priority. So this fan is something the customer sent us. So it's a solid part. So we need to break this down into bodies. And now I can take off the fan blades and really get all of that proprietary information out of there. Blah. All right, so I'm going to continue simplifying here after this. I'm going to remove any wires, any clamps, screws, anything I can to get this file size down. Again, we could be one component in a building of tens of thousands of components. So anything we can do to get this file size down, the better. So again, here I go, taking out everything. Export, CAD format, skip. Drop down STP or step files, and I'm just going to export this out to my desktop for reference later. Okay, so next we're going to dive into the simplification process. We're going to do an engineered system for this. This is going to give us a good broad range of examples of, obviously a feed tank, a boiler, a blowdown, how we apply all those. So we're going to follow this right in order. Simplified view, we're going to start with. This is going to choose our components that we want to use to define our envelope, which is going to be a series of boxes and cylinders that is going to create the shapes that we need. All right, so we're going to start off with simplified view. And let's look at the skid. Skid's a good example of what do we need to make the entire skid one shape? Well, we need the front. We need those components because we need to define the front, the back, the bottom, and the right side. Now, that's basically the gist of all of this. We're just going to continue to apply this same concept throughout the skid. I'm just going to go through, I'm picking any customer connections that I need, any defining characteristics like our fan and blower on the front is really what defines the look of a VSRT. So I'm going to grab that. Also, you're going to see the select all occurrences there. So for this, do I want all the unions on the skid? I don't know. So I'm going to unclick that. And I'm only going to pick these two that are the gas inlets. So along with piping runs, follow this up. What you want is you want every T or elbow that there's a change in direction. And you also want the next pipe after that. Now you can stretch this pipe all the way down to the next connection. So you only need one pipe of each run. And then again, all your elbows and T's. So I've got everything here to complete the circuit, so to speak. So I'll just continue here, going and clicking, making sure I got all my customer connections and getting that whole fan and blower. We don't want anything floating in the air. I'm gonna grab the gate valves. They're gonna give me a little extra detail. Doing the preheat because that's the outermost point off the back of the skid. So I want to make sure I include that. And again, you don't want it floating in the air. Grabbing all the piping and connections that I need to get my customer connections. So here I'm just going to reference my PDS, make sure I have all the connections on there. So this is about what you're going to have in the end. You can go back through and you'll be able to select more components. So you have a bounding box or bounding cylinder. Pretty simple to understand. There's only two shapes you have. You can do part or component. Generally, it's going to be part. Select all occurrences. Again, there's going to be parts like for this union. Yes, now I want all my unions. Bounding cylinder. Any union that I kept, I want them all to be the same and apply it to all. So you can see this one over to the right automatically gets the same shape. But there will be times when you don't want it as well. All right, so let's start defining envelopes. Oh, and show or view, or yeah, hide original. So the end goal is to have all these parts hidden, and they're not going to be part of a final simplified part. But there's going to be some parts that are multiple shapes that you're going to have the original for. So quickly bouncing to the skid. Here I'm on a bounding box, and I want to define the outermost limits of what I'm trying to represent. So here I'm pulling on those arrows, and I'm going to find the edge that I want it to go to. So now I'm going to pull this off to the back, spin around. You can see which handle is selected. It turns orange. Select my align tool right there, and it's going to snap it to that plane that I picked. Again, align, bam. So that's my entire skid. It's only one part now. It's going to be much simpler, much smaller than what we previously had. So you can see, again, you're going to want to hide components as you go, but don't worry about it. We'll have a chance at the end to hide anything we missed. So here I'm just going to start applying that concept to all the other parts of the boiler. You want the can exported there. Box, again, I'm just going to pull this into the boiler. I'm going to start working on piping runs. You can see here I missed a piece of pipe. I should have kept that piece of pipe up there, but I'm selecting the axis right there. You can see that dash dot line, click a line, and then I can click a circle, and it's going to snap my cylinder to a different axis. And I just pick the ID of that T, and I stretch it up into the union. And I'm going to make sure I show my original, because I want to keep my T. And now I've just created that pipe. So now I can just continue this on, just using my cylinders, stretching them out into the next elbow or T, whatever the next connection point is. Now you see here I had to select all occurrences, and it popped up, so that was just a regular 2-inch nipple. Any place that nipple was that I didn't want that to be whatever I'm stretching it out to, about 10 inches or so, it also occurred there, which I didn't want. So I had to make sure I unclicked select all occurrences. And again, I'm just going to trace this piping around, complete the circuit here as we speed it up. So you got your air inlet there, making that a simple shape. I'm leaving the elbow, making my pumps just boxes, do my rails, panel box, cylinders, connections. Pretty straightforward, it's just time involved to create it all. But once you have the general gist of it down, it's really just putting in the time to get it done. Making my blowdown just a solid cylinder. They don't care what the legs look like. Again, I've got my preheat here. That's part of the outermost boundary of my skid, so I included that. Steam header, I'm going to simplify. One big pipe going the entire length with just some more diving into it. So just to reiterate, you don't want anything floating in air, so we're making our flanges here. Remember to save, especially when you go to edit view. So if you need to edit view, you forgot something. You expand out your view, you're going to see simplified view. right click, edit view. Now it's going to bring all your components back in, bring you back to the master view. And from here, you'll be able to zoom in and click the component that you missed. Forgot a T, or you forgot this cylinder or customer connection. So you can edit the view, add that piece back in. You don't have to start all over. Do a quick save after that, and we can keep going here. Again, I'm leaving elbows, leaving T's. I'm going to leave the gate valve. We've got room in this that it can afford that level of detail. I am going to take the fan and simplify that down. This takes a few shapes, but with a little bit of work, you can get it down, and it really pays off to keep our file size low, which the guys on the other end are really going to appreciate. Again, they have normal computers like us, and we know how painful opening up some of our more difficult, more complex assemblies are. Imagine having our assembly and then another 500 on top of it. So they just need the footprint, just the general idea of what they have to connect to. So I'm getting pretty close here. So I'm going to move the end of features all the way up. I'm looking for anything I forgot. I noticed, my pump plate, forgot that. Quickly go through, put a bounding box on that. Move my features back up again. Now I'm going to go through and, okay, I don't need those jackets. I just needed them for shape. Most of my elbows are going to stay. Some of them are not. And I'm just going to go through and turn off visibility on these components that I don't need anymore. This is part of preparing to create that simplified part. It's only going to use the envelopes and any parts that we have visible. All right, so I'm going to bring this back down, taking another look, looking pretty good. Just doing some final cleanup here. Some last corrections. And again, you're looking at like 2 to 3 hours it took me to do this. All right, so now we're going to create a simplified part, final step in our simplification dropdown. Create simplified part. Again, we're taking all those parts that we still have visible in our envelopes, and we're going to make a single IPT out of them. Okay, so now we just have a series of extrusions for our envelopes and our simplified part, and it's looking pretty good. So now we're ready to go into BIM content. So environments, BIM content, and first thing we want to do is do some authoring. You'll notice the view cube orientation there. That's generally going to be what you want. There will be times after you send it out to myself or somebody with a Revit license that they say, hey, it's actually on its back for some reason or upside down. It just happens sometimes, and you just have to troubleshoot it as those come up. So we're going to throw on the description from the PDS, Fulton Engineered System. And yep, Fulton's a manufacturer. Model, I'm just going to put the 699 model number there and throw in a reference to Fulton.com. And now I'm ready to put some connections on it. Now we don't worry about the electrical connections now. Mainly we're worried about the piping connections. So it's on circle by default. Almost everything we do is going to be circle. Now your nominal diameter, that's where you want to put the actual pipe size. Leave the diameter the same, but the nominal diameter. Now, steam outlet's a bad example because on a 699, that can change depending on the trim pressure of the boiler. You're also going to want to put the direction. It's going to be out for steam outlet. And the connection type. You have threaded, you can have flanged, you can have slip. And then in the description, this one is important. This is one of the things that transfers over and is best seen by the next guy. We always want it to be description, size, and then type of connection. All right, so from here, again, steam outlet can be anywhere from 4 to 10 on this boiler. But on condensate, okay, now we can do this. Nominal pipe diameter is going to be 3 inches. Type is always going to be other. Now in condensate, it's going to be in, threaded. You're going to notice that arrow is still pointing out, and that's correct. You always want the arrow pointing out because that's the direction when they connect their piping in Revit, it's going to go, right? So it's an inwards connection because it's condensate return, but they're going to pipe in the direction of the arrow. So here I'm going to go through, I'm going to add all the other connections here. See, I had to flip that one around. And this is what it's going to look like in the end. Something like this. Got all your connections in the end. It's a simplified part. Now we're ready to export building components. So select export building components. It's going to automatically choose RFA. This will actually take quite a while to export. A couple minutes is what I'm saying. You're going to check it, make sure everything's a success, and then you'll send it to, again, myself or someone else with a Revit license to give this a check before we send off to the customer. And again, things can go wonky once they go from Inventor to Revit. But our file size is looking really good. We're just over 1 megabyte here for an entire skid system. And here, I'm just showing you another example. This is a skid that someone else has done, but you're going to see the same concepts applied. So you can see here, it looks like there's a shrink wrap boiler in there, so we have to turn the visibility off on that. And it does look like we need some repairs here, but you can see the main chunk of it is still there, and that's going to save us a lot of work. Here's an FBS. You see this is a weldment, so what I actually had to do was put this weldment in a normal assembly to perform the simplification process. That's not an option in a normal weldment. So here's what it was before, the default view, and then simplified. So I probably should have left the gate valve as an actual gate valve. It's just a feel thing of how much memory or space you want to take up versus how the product is going to look. You want it to be nice, but you want it to be simple. So let's take a look at it inside Revit. So you can see I've added text to the panel box here. I do that for a lot of our standard components just to make sure they know it's a Fulton product and what it is. The other thing we're going to do once it's inside Revit, we'll change it to global connections. And the last thing we'll do is we'll change the family type to mechanical equipment instead of just generic. Just categorizes our equipment a little bit better, but again, like 98% of the work was done in Inventor. We're just cleaning it up a little bit in Revit. That's why you do not need a Revit license to be able to export to Revit. Here's another example of the 250. Again, very simple. Yes, we could have added some more detail in there. Maybe could have painted a few components differently. But in general, it's just a simple file of customer connections and the bounding box, the footprint of the boiler. Use a VSRT E60, at least prototype. Okay, so now everyone should be okay with creating a Revit file, or at least prepping a Revit file. You can see most of the work is done in Inventor. The Revit license is really just to check it. That's why we only had 2 here at Fulton. Those also cost a lot more. But you can do most of the prep work within Inventor, at least like 95% of it. So just something to note, when we first exported that VSRT 250, so a straight export of the 250 is 454 megabytes. That's a huge file size, not really something we can send around to customers. Not that we would anyways for PV reasons, but just simply taking the PV out as we did, along with screws and the patterns, welds, stuff like that. We were able to get it to 114 megabytes. That's still really too big. I would probably go take that back in and do some further, turning components off, see what I missed, see any complicated shapes I could remove, and try to get that down more. But after our enveloping process and using that simplified panel, so taking that create simplified part and you have your IPT there, exporting that to a straight STP is only 2.06 megabytes. And then even further, when you export it to an RFA or a Revit file, it was down to 760 kilobytes. Now you can imagine if you're working giant building, lots of components, you want the boiler to be fairly small as far as file size goes. It's just not worth it for something that's going in the basement to be, it's not going to be part of the rendering of the building in the end. So we just need to get footprint and customer connections so they can do what they need to in the end. And that's really all they care about. So it might look silly, it might look dumb compared to what we normally put out, but that's in the end what the customer wants. So I hope I explained everything well enough. I know it was fast, so please feel free to reach out with any questions, or if you need a little bit of hands-on training as well, I'm always available. All right, well, thanks for watching.